The grand, gilded doors of Buckingham Palace have long been a symbol of both welcome and absolute exclusion. But tonight, those doors didn't just close. They were effectively welded shut. In a move that has sent tremors through every capital of the Commonwealth, the palace has officially confirmed what many feared but few dared to believe. The final lockdown on Prince Harry's royal return and his family's heritage. This is not a temporary cooling of relations. This is a constitutional severance, a cold and calculated decree that erases the very possibility of a royal homecoming. For years, the public has watched the agonizing back and forth, the whispers of olive branches, and the hope of a father's forgiveness. But behind the heavy curtains of the royal apartments, a different story was being written, a story of institutional survival over personal sentiment. King Charles III, standing beside his heir, Prince William, has ratified a document that functions as a royal firewall. This confirmation isn't just about Harry, it's about the integrity of the crown itself. It is the moment the monarchy decided that the risk of Harry's unpredictability outweighed the history of his birthright. According to deep-cover palace insiders, the atmosphere during the final signing was one of solemn finality. There were no heated arguments, no last-minute pleas. The decision had been reached after months of intense legal and constitutional review. The palace is no longer managing a family feud. They are managing a constitutional crisis. By confirming this final lockdown, the king has signaled that the path back to royal life for the Duke of Sussex is not just blocked, it no longer exists in the eyes of the institution. What triggered this sudden, absolute move? Why now, when the monarchy is already facing a shortage of working royals? The answer lies in a series of unforgivable breaches that compromised the inner sanctum of the family. The palace realized that transparency was being used as a weapon, and the only defense was total, institutional silence. This lockdown is the ultimate power play. It tells the world that the crown is not a reality show that can be negotiated in the press. It is an ancient covenant that demands absolute loyalty or total exile. As you listen to these words, realize that you are witnessing the end of an era. The spare has been officially detached from the mechanism of the monarchy. The emotional center of this story isn't just about a son losing his place. It's about an institution choosing its survival over its own blood. The palace has dropped the mask of family first and replaced it with the cold, hard steel of crown first. The confirmation of this lockdown was dispatched to high-level government officials and senior royal staff under the title Operation Heritage Reset. The language of the document was described as clinical and without ambiguity. It explicitly removes Harry from any contingency plans for the future reign, ensuring that the transition of power remains entirely within the direct line of succession. This is the king's final word, a legacy-defining act that ensures Prince William's path to the throne is unencumbered by the controversies of the past. For Harry, sitting in his Montecito estate, the news reportedly came not through a personal call, but through the same formal channels as any other administrative update. The privacy he sought has now been weaponized against him by the very institution he left. The palace is granting him exactly what he asked for: space, but they are doing so by removing the floor beneath his royal feet. The succession firewall, as insiders call it, is a 200-page legal binding that was finalized in a midnight session at Windsor. It doesn't just block Harry, it prevents any future attempts by his descendants to claim royal status, effectively pruning the Windsor family tree. This wasn't a choice made in anger, but in the cold light of institutional preservation. The message is undeniable. The crown has no room for those who do not respect its silence. While the world focuses on King Charles, the true architect behind the final lockdown is reportedly the Prince of Wales himself. This wasn't just about a brotherly fallout. It was a strategic moping up of a perceived threat to the stability of the future monarchy. Prince William has long understood that a modern monarchy cannot survive if its internal mechanics are constantly leaked to the highest bidder. In private library sessions at Windsor, he delivered an unforgivable truth to his father. The crown's credibility was being bled dry by the Sussex's continuous media narrative. William's intervention was described by palace aides as a crossroads moment. He didn't just ask for a distance. He demanded a total constitutional firewall. He argued that every olive branch extended by the king was being repurposed as a weapon against the institution. The message from the heir was blunt. Your silence makes her stronger, and it makes us weaker. This line now echoes through the palace as the turning point when the monarchy shifted from passive observation to active containment. Behind the scenes, William has been working with senior legal advisors to ensure that this lockdown is watertight. They have sifted through centuries of royal protocol to find the mechanisms needed to prune the family tree without causing a constitutional collapse. The resulting 200-page document is a legal masterpiece that effectively unbirths Harry from the royal mechanism. It ensures that no matter what personal apologies might be whispered in the years to come, the institutional door remains locked. For Harry and Meghan, the implications are devastating and absolute. The palace has moved beyond managing the optics and has begun to control reality itself. By removing Harry from any future ceremonial or contingency plans, they have stripped him of his only real currency, his relevance to the crown. He is no longer the spare to be protected. He is now a private citizen whose royal heritage has been turned into a historical footnote. The Prince of Wales has reportedly made it clear to the inner circle that if the monarchy failed to take this public position, he would be forced to do it himself upon his accession. This was a subtle ultimatum wrapped in duty, forcing King Charles to choose between his son and the crown. By choosing the crown, the king has signaled that the era of blended family unity is over. The palace has reached its breaking point, and the resulting silence is the loudest statement they have ever made. This is the cold reality of power. In a battle between blood and the throne always wins. The lockdown is now complete, and the firewall is active. The cold finality of the current lockdown did not originate solely from King Charles or Prince William. It traces back to a sealed codicil hidden away since the aftermath of Queen Elizabeth II's funeral in 2023. While the public saw a mourning grandmother, the late monarch was secretly acting as the deeply protective guardian of the bloodline. She was wary of anything that could dilute the crown's symbolic strength or allow the institution to be reshaped by favor rather than tradition. This forgotten royal clause, unearthed by William's legal team in the palace archives, became the final blow to Harry's family future. The handwritten document, once opened, delivered a clinical and decisive judgment that explicitly barred any descendants of the Sussex line from entering the line of succession or holding official royal roles. There were no footnotes, no qualifiers, and no room for ambiguity. It was the ultimate succession firewall, a posthumous order from the woman who defined the monarchy for 7 decades. The Queen's wording insisted that while personal unions could be celebrated privately, the crown must remain unmarred by the confusion of spouse-affiliated relations or diluted lineage. This discovery was a revelation for palace officials, providing a legal foundation that the current king could not ignore. The message was clear. The monarchy doesn't just manage feelings. It manages perception and institutional survival. For Harry, this means his legacy has been institutionally dismissed by the very person he claimed to respect most. The Queen's shadow has effectively cast him out from the royal fabric, ensuring that his family's ambitions began to unravel under the weight of history. This was the brutal political maneuver disguised as protocol that Harry never anticipated would erupt from within the palace walls. Inside the palace, the discovery of this clause ended the debate once and for all. It proved that the crown is not a fairy tale, but a cold mechanism of power that values the bloodline above all else. As the Queen's final words echoed through the halls, it became evident that the monarchy had chosen its future, and that future has been welded shut against any non-royal encroachment. The true brutality of the final lockdown lies not just in the legal exclusion, but in the total removal of Prince Harry's only real currency, his royal relevance. By confirming this absolute severance, the palace has effectively turned a global figure back into a private citizen, stripped of the institutional machinery that once amplified his voice. This wasn't a decision made in a fit of rage. It was a clinical assessment of risk versus asset, concluding that the Sussex brand was now a liability to the crown's future. According to those inside the inner circle, Harry and Meghan are no longer being managed. They are being erased from the working royal narrative. This tactical silence from Buckingham Palace is far more damaging than any public rebuttal could ever be. It grants the Sussexes the privacy they publicly demanded, but weaponizes it by cutting off the very source of their public influence. Without the Windsor seal, their narrative loses its historical weight, becoming just another celebrity story in a crowded market. While Harry's lineage is being institutionally pruned, a new and purified hierarchy is emerging with unmistakable clarity. The Prince and Princess of Wales's children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, have been moved to the absolute center of ceremonial protocol. Their future roles are no longer just expectations. They are being reinforced through every layer of internal briefing as the only future of the monarchy. This is more than a restructuring. It is a succession reset that reasserts the bloodline as the ultimate and only law of the land. For Harry, sitting in the silence of Montecito, the realization is reportedly sinking in that he is no longer part of the contingency plan. The palace has demonstrated that they can and will function without him. By choosing the institution over the individual, King Charles has signaled that the crown does not bend to sentiment, nor does it negotiate its survival. The message to the Commonwealth is undeniable. The institution is immortal, even if the family is fractured. The lockdown is not just a physical barrier, it is a psychological one. It tells the world that the crown is not a blended family project, but a bloodline covenant. Every invitation revoked, and every name removed from naming events is a deliberate stitch in the new fabric of the monarchy, a fabric that no longer includes the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Behind the calm official tone of royal portraits and joint appearances, a slow-burning war has been raging inside the crown for years. This wasn't just about a single announcement. It was a decades-long struggle between traditional bloodline preservation and the quiet infiltration of non-royal influences. The final lockdown on Prince Harry represents the moment the monarchy finally drew a hard and final line, choosing institutional stability over the unpredictable volatility of those who operate in the shadows. For years, the public saw a supportive and loyal spouse-affiliated narrative, but behind palace gates, an ambitious strategy was unfolding that threatened to dilute the symbolic strength of the monarchy. Senior palace lawyers were summoned for unrecorded consultations, and requests were made to extend ceremonial recognition to those born outside the royal bloodline. However, the institutional resistance, led by Princess Anne and Prince William, remained coldly absolute. The palace has now moved from managing the optics to controlling reality itself. By invoking the succession firewall, they have ensured that the crown symbolism will never be redefined behind closed doors or reshaped by favor rather than tradition. This decision was a brutal political maneuver, disguised as protocol, intended to protect the crown's credibility from being bled dry by external narratives. When the lockdown was finalized, Harry was reportedly discovered to be institutionally dismissed, receiving the news via cold, concise proclamation rather than a father's phone call. The privacy he once sought has been officially granted, but in a way that strips him of his currency and removes the floor beneath his royal feet. There is no room for negotiation, no window for reinterpretation, and no heads up from King Charles. This is the succession reset in its most severe form. The palace does not gloat. It simply makes its position permanent, ensuring that the transition of power remains entirely within the Windsor line. The message to the world is clear. The crown manages perception and power, and it will not allow its ancient covenant to be broken by personal ambition or maternal affection. The confirmation of the final lockdown marks the beginning of what insiders call a total institutional erasure. The monarchy has moved beyond a simple family dispute to a clinical Operation Heritage Reset, a process designed to treat Prince Harry's presence as a historical anomaly rather than a living part of the royal future. By signing this decree at precisely 11:06 a.m., King Charles III didn't just end a debate. He activated a legal firewall that prevents any future reign from reversing this decision without an act of parliament. This is the succession reset in its most absolute form. the palace has effectively unbirthed the Sussex line from the constitutional mechanism of the crown. It is a strategic move to ensure that the Windsor bloodline remains unmarred by the controversies of the last 5 years. The message is cold and absolute. Personal ties are one thing, but the ancient covenant of the throne is another, and it demands the total exclusion of those who do not respect its silence. For Harry, the reality of being institutionally dismissed means that his name is being systematically removed from the strategic planning of the monarchy. Trustees have been reassigned, and his scheduled appearances at major future events have been quietly deleted from the ledger. He is witnessing, in real time, the reaffirmation of the Windsor line that no longer requires his participation. This is the price of his self-proclaimed privacy. The palace has taken his request and turned it into a permanent, legal exile. The Prince of Wales has reportedly insisted that this lockdown remain watertight. Every name removed and every invitation revoked is a deliberate act of institutional containment. William's vision of a purified hierarchy focuses solely on the direct line, ensuring that the transition of power to his children is never encumbered by the unpredictable volatility of those who chose to leave. The palace isn't just closing a door, they are rebuilding the house without a spare room. Behind the scenes, the staff at Clarence House and Buckingham Palace have been placed on standby for internal volatility. There is an understanding that while Harry may remain a family member in name, as a royal actor, he is now historical noise. The monarchy has proven it can bleed, but with this decree, it has shown it knows exactly how to cauterize the wound. While the public often views the monarchy through the lens of glamour, Princess Anne operates through the lens of clinical precision and unyielding duty. As the most consistent sentinel of the Windsor bloodline, Anne reportedly issued a private and chilling warning to her brother. This will end badly, Charles. For her, the monarchy is not a club of influence to be expanded based on maternal affection or personal whim. It is a sacred covenant that demands total adherence to tradition. Anne's influence behind the palace gates was the decisive weight that tipped the scales toward the final lockdown. She has spent decades sacrificing personal comfort for the stability of the institution, and she saw the Sussexes' maneuvers as a direct threat to the integrity of royal succession. When requests surfaced to grant symbolic status or ceremonial recognition to those outside the bloodline, Anne's committee delivered a quiet but firm rejection with no explanation given. This succession firewall was fortified by Anne's insistence that the crown cannot be reshaped by favor. She recognized a growing fracture between public trust and internal maneuvering, warning senior advisors of reputational decay if the monarchy began to look like a polished PR machine rather than a sovereign power. Her loyalty has never been to personalities, but to the monarchy itself, and her refusal to entertain emotional pleas has effectively ratified the exile. Inside Clarence House, the reaction to Anne's unchecked power was reportedly one of fury and humiliation. Yet, Anne remained undeterred, standing as the human firewall against any attempt to dilute the royal lineage. She has ensured that the mask has dropped and the institution has returned to its coldly absolute foundations. The palace has sent an unyielding message to the world. The bloodline is not optional background noise, it is the law. As the lockdown remains watertight, it is clear that the sentinel has done her duty. The covenant is preserved, and the door is locked from the inside. While the palace maintained its cold, concise proclamation, the Sussex camp reportedly made one final, desperate move that backfired spectacularly. In a brutal political maneuver disguised as protocol, the institution stood firm as the cameras were rolling. What was intended as a respectful plea to bridge the gap turned into a public display of rejection and institutional dismissal. The palace's strategic isolation of Harry was further cemented when it was revealed that even senior palace lawyers had been summoned to ensure the succession firewall was legally binding and irreversible. This was not a negotiation. It was a clinical and beyond interpretation judgment. Any attempt to circumvent centuries of tradition for personal gain was met with a solemn reaffirmation of the Windsor line. Inside the palace walls, Prince William's unyielding resolve was described as furious. To the heir, These unannounced appearances and informal petitioning were not just poor judgment, they were a direct challenge to the crown's authority. He reportedly warned the king that such attempts would only fracture public trust further. The message was clear. The monarchy would not bend to sentiment. The succession reset has now moved into a phase where even invitations to private dinners and ceremonial naming events have been revoked. The palace has dropped its guard, only to show its cold, hard steel. This slow-burning war inside the crown has reached its climax, with the ancient institution proving it can adapt to human vulnerability by simply erasing it from the ledger. The final threshold has been crossed. The crown does not punish, it simply makes its position permanent. The narrative shifted from speculation to a solemn and absolute reality. The Sussex family will never truly be allowed to cement their legacy within the Windsor fabric. The Queen's shadow, even in death, continues to cast them out. The confirmation of the final lockdown was not merely a verbal agreement. It was a legal firewall, stamped with the sovereign seal and locked into the official royal record. At precisely 11:06 a.m., the monarchy drew a permanent line that defined the future for generations to come, ensuring that the transition of power remains entirely within the direct Windsor bloodline. This decree is institutionally absolute, requiring an act of Parliament to reverse an act that legal experts confirm would never pass in the current political climate. The succession reset has effectively removed the Sussexes from the contingency plan of the monarchy. Prince William has reportedly moved his own children George, Charlotte, and Louis to the absolute center of every ceremonial protocol, reinforcing their status as the only future the crown recognizes. This shift is not just a restructuring of duties, it is a reset of the royal hierarchy that reasserts the bloodline not just as tradition, but as immutable law. For Harry, the reality of this Operation Heritage Reset means that his currency of relevance has been completely devalued. The palace has institutionally dismissed his influence, removing his name from strategic planning and naming events. By choosing the institution over personal sentiment, King Charles has signaled that the era of the blended royal family is officially over. The king's final word is a legacy-defining act, designed to ensure that the future reign is unencumbered by the controversies of the past. The succession firewall has been described by insiders as a midnight session masterpiece that prunes the family tree in the cold light of institutional preservation. There is no longer any window for reinterpretation or quiet infiltration of the royal framework. The palace does not gloat over this exclusion. It simply makes its position permanent, standing on a foundation of unity, continuity, and bloodline preservation. As this lockdown remains watertight, the message to the world is undeniable. The crown manages power, not feelings. The Sussex lineage has been historicalized, turned into a footnote by a system that has reached its breaking point and chosen to survive by erasing those who challenged its silence. The final confirmation of the lockdown signifies that the British monarchy has reached its ultimate breaking point and chosen a path of clinical survival over personal sentiment. This wasn't just a statement. It was a confession that the system can no longer afford the luxury of a fairy tale narrative where everyone eventually returns to the fold. By officially welding shut the doors against Prince Harry and his family's heritage, King Charles and Prince William have declared that the crown is a bloodline covenant that demands absolute loyalty or total, permanent exile. The succession reset is now a permanent fixture of British law, ensuring that the monarchy survives in a world that has watched its internal fractures in real time. The palace has moved beyond the need for polished lines and has embraced the cold, hard steel of institutional preservation. This legacy-defining act ensures that the future of the crown, centered solely on the direct line of Prince William and his children, remains unmarred by the unpredictable volatility of those who sought to redefine the rules from the outside. For the public, this is a moment the mask slipped, revealing that behind the gilded gates lies not just a family, but a sovereign power, capable of erasing its own blood to protect its symbolic strength. The Sussex lineage has been institutionally dismissed, transformed into a historical footnote by a system that refuses to let its ancient wheels be stalled by personal grievance. The message to the millions who watch is unmistakable. The crown manages perception and power, and it will never go back to pretending that nothing ever breaks behind palace walls. As the silence now fills the space where legacy ambitions once lived, the monarchy stands as a constitutional sentinel, ready to face the 21st century with a purified hierarchy. The era of the spare is over. The era of the succession firewall has begun. The institution has proven it is mortal enough to bleed, but immortal enough to cauterize its wounds and move forward, alone if necessary, but always absolute.